It's great to see you all here today. I want to welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Jamie Sanderson Reid, and I'm on the Communications and Outreach Advisory Council of Unveiled, Bridging the Gap to Sponsorship. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to enabling equitable access through bold conversations, tangible action, and a community committed to transforming systems. By reimagining access, opportunity, and sponsorship, we're building a world where access to opportunities isn't reserved for a lucky few. Our fireside chats are safe, bold spaces where we have candid conversations with change makers who are challenging the status quo, leading with purpose, and showing what's possible. And we are committed to that, making this a conversation, and we look forward to hearing all of your voices as we get into the discussion here today. In lieu of introduction, so sometimes in the past I would read a bio, but with you two, you're so dynamic and so amazing that I'd really love for you to start with your personal journeys. Looking back at the experiences that shaped you, would you be able to share a little bit about your journey, and also in particular one leadership lesson you've learned that never appeared on a resume but has been critical to your success, giving a nod to our theme of going beyond the resume?
Great. George, please.
Emily, go first, please.
Okay, thank you. So, hi, it's wonderful to be with all of you. And as Jamie said, we definitely want this to be an interactive session. But just to get us started, I'm Emily Frieze-Kemeny. I'm the founder and CEO of a Rose Group. We're a global leadership development and organizational design firm. I spent my career until about 4.5 years ago in-house in big public companies. I was on Wall Street at Morgan Stanley, IBM, Avon, and Scholastic, heading up leadership development, talent management, OD work, and loved it, and now do it at scale across a wide variety of organizations. And I'd say that, and then also have a podcast called Let's Talk People, and family, living in New Jersey. So happy to share whatever would be helpful. That's just a little bit about kind of my professional journey. And then I'd say that if I go back even further in my career journey, starting as young as middle school, I wanted to be a judge. And I think a lot about how did I even know that was a thing? Maybe I watched Judge Judy. It's not totally clear how that came to me. So the word that came to me as I was thinking about what is the thing that's not on my resume is a very similar pattern to that early career passion, which is judgment. I remember my boss telling me this very early in my HR career, that I had really good judgment. And when I think about how that has showed up throughout my career, it's really about my real ability to be present with leaders, teams, and just sink in and really hear their words, and then know how to connect dots between what people say, and then maybe even help to take it a little bit further through the questions that I ask. So sometimes professionally, I would consider that like putting on my facilitator hat. But really what it's based in is your ability to kind of judge and listen and hear what's being said, connect the dots, and help people to kind of take their conversations, their decision-making, their insights, their strategy even further, just by being in support of their own process. So that's an example of something that I really believe is what differentiates me and has in my career, that you could never find on a resume, that is a superpower that all of us actually have.
So for me, I'll try to make a very long history short. I grew up in a family of limited means. So I enlisted in the Army and caught the leadership bug. And after making sergeant, decided to become an officer. Was around the world, and some wonderful countries, some bad countries. Started out in Berlin, went through Somalia, Panama, Guantanamo Bay, a bunch of places. But really for the last 25 years, and it's really frightening to admit that number, I've been in talent acquisition in one form or another. Along the way, don't know what inspired me, but decided to write a book on talent, now releasing the second one. And now I do executive search and executive coaching. And I would say for leadership lesson, probably two. And one I wish I had learned earlier, which is that one of the most compelling traits, one of the most important traits of being a successful leader or being seen as a leader is humility, that the best idea wins, and you don't have to have it. And then the second part, I think is really important to people to understand that leadership is a verb and leader is a noun, and you don't get to select yourself or anoint yourself as a leader. That's something else. It's a privilege that others bestow upon you. And it took a while to learn that, but learning that along the way really shaped how I would mentor and grow and coach other leaders and pass on the patience, the extreme patience and tolerance that other leaders had with me along the way. So it's good to be with you guys today.
Thank you both. So kind of building on that and our theme of beyond the resume, in a world where AI can help everyone improve their resumes, I've used it myself for my resume. What truly differentiates people and leaders today? I mean, George, maybe you can start with this. You started to call out some of those things.
I think humility is one of them because I'm interviewing senior leaders and executives. I always want to know, look, so many people leave companies and transition, but really the question is, have you created a legacy of leadership? Are you creating leaders that will carry on your results and improve them even after you've left, whether that's retirement or to a new role? Are you passing on as a leader what you've learned to others so that the team wins versus you singularly win? So that's one of the things that I'm looking at, is looking for the humility, meaning the resume tells me what you've done, but character tells me where you're going.
I appreciate that so much, George, and I totally agree with you, because what humility means when we really think about that term, it's not just how you present yourself and what you say and what you don't say. I think that the deep thing that's there, that when we feel that it's authentic, is that somebody knows they still can grow and learn. And I think that there's been a myth that we've seen in leaders where success is about your ability to be all knowing, all seeing, all doing. Like you're like the one-stop shop. And any of us who've then gone on to be leaders or to work for leaders and have seen quite the contrary know that that's not a truth. It's not human. And so when I think about, and I'll just kind of build on it, that idea of humility, it's knowing that it's safe. And if anything, it uplifts other people when you do bring value. Of course, every leader is expected to bring value, but that you also make people feel needed and seen. And we've really been trying at a Rose Group, like my firm, to change the perception of what it means to have power as a leader. And one of the things that ties to this is about being connected. And so leadership can isolate us. And that's one of the hardest parts of leadership, is feeling very alone and exposed. And when you realize that you have all these amazing humans around you, it doesn't matter if you work for them, they're part of your team, they're your colleagues, your customers, your partners. You are surrounded by incredible power and of thought and of experience. So that's one of the things that I always think about, is if we only asked for help more, that would change what it means to lead. It would change retention, because we all know what it feels like when somebody asks us and say, hey, like, Emily, I really would appreciate thinking this through with you. It makes you feel good about yourself. So when we remember how good it feels when we are able to help somebody else, it reminds us that as leaders, instead of being like the one that holds everything for everybody, it's the one who knows when it's strategic and helpful to say, hey, I could really use some thinking help on this, or I'm really struggling on this. Can we talk it through? And that transforms relationships and leadership for everybody.
Leadership is, we're going to come back to this quite a lot throughout the discussion, but as we build our resumes, I think it's one of the most important attributes to really hit on, because whether we're leading a team or leading ourselves, every one of us is a leader. But as we work on the resumes again, Emily, you've built your career around helping people identify their strengths and weaknesses, or potential, and as importantly. So why do so many professionals struggle to recognize and articulate what makes them exceptional?
I think, it's a really important question. The first thing that comes to mind for me is we've been taught to be appropriate. And so this is the kind of the little bit of the ball of yarn we get ourselves in between humility and being able to advocate for yourself and show your strength, which is essential whether you're building a career, trying to influence strategies and decisions, or trying to find a new job. So the way that I think about it is being able to have impact is expected. And so when you think about articulating your strengths from a place of what's the impact that I've made, and like part two related to that is not just the impact I've made, what's the impact that makes me feel really proud? Because when we communicate those two things, you're signaling not only where you have strength, but you're signaling to others where you want to do more of that. And that's the magic. When those two things come together, not only do we thrive and we're happy, but that radiates, I think, to everybody around us. Like they can feel that light that we put out there into the world, and you're going to get better results for the organization. So I think if you think in the word of impact and specificity, that helps to get past that bit of like, I don't want to sound like I'm egotistical or inappropriate. Or like what happens to me when I talk about myself, like I'll literally start sweating. Like I get so uncomfortable. So at least that way, like you can kind of, and when you're, when you're in an important room, feeling sweaty is not comfortable either. But I think it's a way of, it like takes it out of you and still talks about you, but in the language of results.
That's awesome. And I got a little tongue-tied there because as I was talking, I realized that I made a mistake. I said strengths and weaknesses, but you really emphasized strengths and potential. But even in your response, you noted a little bit of that includes understanding areas where we can improve. Definitely looking forward to hearing more about how your team helps individuals to identify those potential opportunities and potentials for growth in their own career.
So we're human beings, which means we're, beautifully imperfect. I do think that when we try to align and notice where we have passion, interest, curiosity, want to learn and have strength and have been able to make an impact that matters, like good, go, 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 keep moving in that direction. But I think to your point, Jamie, we're not all strengths based. And there's two places where I see this show up. There's kind of like two things we've built at a Rose Group that will tie to this. So one is when we lean so far into our strengths, especially as leaders, they actually start to constrict us and our team. So that's an interesting dynamic of like anything in excess. Think about your favorite food, right? Like if I'm really like, wanting to like live it up, it'd be French fries. Like it's okay. Like I can have a French fry. Like that's totally normal and healthy-ish. But if I had that every day, 3 times a day, like then we'd have a problem. So, there's fulfillment and enjoyment and passion, and then it can go tilt. So what I'd say is watch where your strengths are, because when you lean very far into your strengths, they're going to start to actually become your weakness. So that's an interesting dynamic that we can pay attention to. And so that's about being able to kind of know when to pull back a little bit and look at things from a different perspective or ask again for help. The other part of it is when we have an area where we're not as strong, and I have plenty of them, and I'm so thankful to have team and have experts. So I don't believe that being a leader, even as a CEO, which is the position I'm in now, means that I have to know everything. But it's about the ability to ask good questions. As we talked about before, ask for help, and to be able to receive feedback. You are not going to get feedback the more senior you get unless you ask people, and then there's the way you ask it. And I'd say an example of the way you ask it is, I'll just give you a couple like, types of questions would be, I would really like to understand something that I could do that could make it even easier for you to work with me, or for me to be able to give you feedback in a way that motivates you. Or, if you self-disclose and say, yeah, like I'm not so proud of that, project that we worked on. I think some things could have been done better. Here's what I think I did that maybe I could have done differently. How did you see it? So the fact that I already vulnerably put something out there means that they kind of know what's safe, that I already have self-awareness around, and then they can build on that and also know that like I'm open to knowing that I'm not perfect. So those are just a couple of techniques, because it can be hard for us to get feedback. We get a little scared to give it to each other.
Thanks. That's really helpful, Emily. And it makes me think of something that George has said before in our prior discussions is that really one of the biggest challenges is being able to communicate what the person has accomplished. Like, how do I communicate in my resume what I have accomplished and also how I have accomplished it? So connecting the dots between those things and really communicating value. Could you elaborate on that, George?
Yeah, I think that's where people struggle. And I would tell you the more senior you get, A lot of times you walk into problems and collaboration, and there's a lot of muscle memory that takes over. So you have this resume with a lot of objective traits, points of fact, things that you've accomplished. You certainly can't on a resume elaborate how you did it, but that's what you have to be able to do in an interview. So most people, while they're focused on their resume, don't take stock of what their attributes, their characteristics, and the how they accomplished all of those things. And the interesting thing that I share with people, something I learned in the military a long time ago, is that professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. And so if you're using a resume to interview, you really have to take a hard look at yourself and know yourself and how you accomplish those things and practice articulating them. Talking doesn't come naturally. It does to me because I was a skinny kid named George and poor. So you learn to talk, fight, and run. If you wanted to date, you had to be able to talk or have a sense of humor. And I would tell you, most of the executives that I work with now, when I'm interviewing them for a role or coaching them, it's the articulation. Like, wow, they've written this amazing accomplishment. But then when I say, well, walk me through what the difficult points were, how did you walk through the thought process of solving that problem? Whose help did you seek out? And they start to stumble because it was muscle memory when they did it. But in an interview, they don't see that muscle memory in you. You have to articulate it clearly, and you have to practice that and know it. So your resume is a set of objective assets. Your internal knowing yourself is subjective assets, and how you attach those to each one of your accomplishments.
This discussion is it's broad, but it's very personal, I think, for each member of the audience who's here, who's going to listen on to the recording after. One of the themes that came up is how difficult it is to even get an interview, because with AI being on both sides of preparing resumes and also screening resumes from the HR side, one of the topics that came up was the importance of networking. And I would love to hear your thoughts on, has networking changed? Does it still remain, a good way to build relationships and find opportunities? I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable with the word networking itself, but but it's a part of our reality.
I'll lead off. I will tell you, in writing the first book, I had to tally up how many people my teams have hired. So here I am talking about humility, and I'm about to tell you about a big number. It's like north of 87,000 now.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
But I will tell you, over 25 years, one factor's never changed. The number, even with AI, the number one way to get a job is employee referral. It's not changed. And AI won't change that, because if AI puts all of these resumes, and by the way, there are a lot of class action lawsuits out against some of these AI companies right now for, the bias and stuff like that. We'll see how that pans out. But even though that they sort resumes from 1 to 25 of who that recruiter or a researcher should look at, it's another thing for somebody who knows you or knows your work to walk to a recruiter or hiring manager and say, hey, you know what? I've worked with this person. They're worthy of your time to call. That is still the number one way. So but I want to back up just one tiny bit and add something. A lot of people, when they're doing the job search, over network. And the way that you solve that is make sure that you define success, because you can't hit a target you can't see. And you could spend forever on LinkedIn networking. Make sure you understand what you're looking for, so you know the first level of connections you ought to be reconnecting with or initiating a conversation with. So you're using your time and networking efficiently as well. Define success, define your targets, make sure that you're reaching out to those people, because that's meaningful, and always ask what you can do for them as well.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on networking, Emily?
I mean, where you left off, George, was where my mind was going to. It's like the best networking is generosity and not having an expectation of someone else. I think it's really hard when we start to feel that time pressure, where we're either just ready to take on a more expansive role or ready to find a new job, or we're in transition, which is obviously the hardest because you feel like that clock is ticking. And there's something about that desperation and that urgency that has a way of energetically turning off other people. And it's so hard because it takes a lot of self-work to be able to kind of like settle yourself. But when you can just be present with somebody and connect with them, to catch up, to be curious about them, to learn, to get their perspective on the market,
Yeah.
what they're seeing as trends, a book that they've read, being really curious about them and what they know. Just trust that connection, whether in that immediate call leads to a direct opportunity or an intro to somebody else, just know that you made an impact on them that will then allow you to be a bit more top of mind. Yes, if the connection feels strong enough that you can then have an ask, go for it. But I would just say just to gauge whether it's appropriate, because sometimes it takes a few conversations before it's appropriate to ask somebody to do something for you. And as George said, the more you do something for somebody else, the quicker and more enthusiastic they're going to be to help you. So I think that's a really key part. And then the last thing I'd say about networking is you have to have a why for it. So I always joke I was like a working exec. Like I wasn't out there, you couldn't even have found me, outside of the companies I worked in at all. I was a complete ghost because I was heads down. And I therefore was not, thinking about my external network or networking or my personal brand or anything. But when you have the way to kind of unlock that, if that's not your natural way of being in the world, is you have to have a why. And the why has to be real. So you have to have a meaningful reason. And I'd say, let's say it's yes, to get a job or to get a promotion or to get that next kind of big exposure project. So let's say yeah, it's a yes and pick one other thing that sits adjacent to that might be mutually beneficial for the other person. So I think that having that can anchor you so that when you go out and do it, like you have positive energy behind it versus some of the like cynicism that you were kind of referring to, Jamie, or discomfort or just annoyance that you have to do it.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is I put it succinctly to somebody. I don't know why. It was like a gumball thought, didn't even pass the filter, it just rolled off my tongue. But it's like we've all dated or have a needy partner, and that is no fun. We don't like it. So when you're networking, that point you made, Emily, was perfect. Is if you're coming off needy, that's immediately setting the tone for who they're speaking with and should they refer you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
We're
you.
all thinking about that needy person now that we dated.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Totally.
Yes. And thinking about myself as well, I think I know personally, we all have our different like issues that we always have to work on. For me, it's
Yeah.
like
Oh,
I'm a
yeah.
people pleaser. I always feel like I have to perform and deliver. So I go in with that, all this anxiety about instead of just being authentic and just being relaxed, and it
Yeah.
it doesn't help. It builds trust.
I totally agree, Jamie. So I think there's so many important things in that little bit that you even just said. One is the self-awareness around we have to do our self-work because it will keep following you throughout your career. You'll keep getting opportunities to relook at it. And you know what happens? They get a little bit louder and louder each time. So do not underestimate doing some real reflection on maybe it's not the other person, maybe it wasn't the culture, maybe I needed to be in that situation because there was something for me to work on. And, we could do a whole, deep dive couch session on what those have been in my career. And I'm happy to share that if anybody needs that support. But I think the other thing that's really important is even people pleasing, which I'm recovering as well, is it's too much. I remember one of the best pieces of advice I got from somebody is like, you're trying to give more of yourself than they even want to receive. And I was like, woof, like that was like, okay, that one I got. So you're right. So that is about the ability to not be too needy of a job, needing of attention, needing of recognition, needing of, am I good enough? It's all too much for somebody else. That's your stuff. Like that's when we have to kind of hold back some of the narrative in our own head and in our own systems. Obviously we're in the business of coaching. This is why we do this. We all need support, and this is hard work. Sorry, George, please.
No, it's simple, but not easy.
Right.
I've
Very
been
well said.
scanning the chat a little bit, and it seems like the
Yeah.
audience very strongly agrees that with so many of the points that you've made, including like the challenges of leadership that we're facing in the world right now, and difficulty of building trust and the loneliness of leadership, which kind of, it's interesting how all of this goes back to beyond the resume, right? Because we talk about thriving in uncertainty in AI-driven age, and I feel like that's coming out. We even have one question on how do you best train AI on your culture. Before we dive into more of the AI side of things, just considering, I mean, we're at a pivotal moment of change in the world right now. I think we all see it. AI is one factor. It's not the only thing. There's so many other things from like political and like global interactions between nations that is happening that is signaling significant change. And people are uncomfortable. I mean, we see it in day-to-day life, also in navigating our careers and growth. One of the things you mentioned, George, was the idea of shifting your horizon. And I think this is something that you're going to be emphasizing in your upcoming book that's going to be released.
Little, yeah.
Yeah. Could you share what that means and how that can help us as we navigate uncertainty?
So, one of the things when people are doing, and I found this doing a job search or doing things, those of us that have built-in anxiety, of which I have a great deal, it's just DNA in our family. I will play tennis with myself, both sides of the net. I will overload my brain and create brain fog. And I get a lot of candidates that do this. And what I ask them is, what is the near-term horizon? And the reason that people in special operations, people in the military, and those were some of that was really the greatest leadership incubator for me, are able to do things that are pretty astounding is because they're not focused on that horizon that they can't yet see. They're focused on the immediate next horizon. What can they change? Then once their movement towards there is positive, then you look to your next problem set. You look to your next challenge. You look to your next opportunity. But if you're like, well, if I do this, and then this happens, and this happens, well, what if this happens? I mean, you can literally spiral yourself into the ground.
Yes.
So easily. And so it takes a conscious effort, and to Emily's point about what we could get better at is really look at yourself and say, look, what's my near-term target? What's my near-term opportunity or challenge? Focus on that one, get that one done, because moving forward is what matters.
Yeah.
But if you look too far out on the horizon, you usually get paralyzed and don't move forward at all.
Absolutely true. One step at a time. Yeah. Progress over perfection.
Yeah, I mean, that was a real complicated way to say it, but yeah, exactly. But the more experience we get, the more things, I know Emily and I in our work, we really have to guard against. We've got all these years of experience. And so we get into something that we want to do, we want to achieve, we want our team to achieve, or what we want to change in the world. That's a huge topic with all that we know and all that we've done and all that we've experienced. And we really have to focus in and dial in, okay, what's next? And then I would tell everybody else with regards to the job search, number one, you're always enough. Start with that premise. Another thing I would say is the way you build trust, give trust first until somebody disappoints you. Usually works out quite well. And the last thing I tell people, especially shopping, you're looking for a new career, always remember it's never a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. And you put so much emotional weight in your backpack or rucksack, as I would call it, when you're putting a timeline on yourself. That's where the emotional pressure comes. And so throw that stuff out of your backpack. Here's my near-term target, shift the horizon, move, take action, make it happen, move on.
Yeah.
Again, simple, not easy.
I know. Yeah. I mean, George, I everything resonates with me so much. It's like there's a different language we use, but same concept, like our leadership model pivot player is really about the fact that we're in a period of time where the degree of complexity and change and uncertainty is only accelerating. And it was already probably too much for us. Like leading felt really hard and not like the fun hard. And now I think it's just exponentially harder and it's not going to get easier. Like we're in a period, I think, of at least a decade where AI and whatever else will come will continue to create an unpredictable future of how work gets done. You have more generations in the workplace. You have different expectations of what it even means to go to work in a post-pandemic world. So everything is changing. The entire construct of work, I think, is actually changing fundamentally. So how do you kind of lead through that? And like the language we use is like one move, one pivot play at a time. But as George said, sometimes you're the beneficiary of having experience and wisdom and knowledge, but sometimes that's also what holds us back. So this idea of like leading connected, trying to continuously gain perspective so that you don't look at things myopically through one lens or see no way forward at all, so that you always can see some options on how to make that next move. I agree with you, George, like the going too far out, like, yes, you have to have a vision, a strategy, but be soft about that, like that's kind of like what, like, is that like light you can see in the distance, but the how part of leading or just showing up in the world is actually where we have the most important work that we can do. And that's also what changes what it means to lead with power. We call it pivot power because, the predominant form of power that we all know of as leadership actually neurologically changes our brain. It decreases our empathy for others. It decreases our judgment and risk awareness. It increases our impulsiveness and our lack of ability to control our emotions. And that those studies have shown that that is why we see some challenges in the other leaders we're observing, but we all have that same constriction that happens within ourselves. So it's a really important moment in history to realize that power is connected, it's about perspective, and it's about options, so that you always can see that there's a way forward. And just to kind of tie it back to the other thing that you were saying in terms of we don't always know the what and exactly the timing, but it will work out for us. It's this idea that fear and hope are exactly the same thing if you really think about it. They're both about kind of projecting or imagining what's possible. So if you know that they're both kind of, intangible, but they're somewhere in front of you, we can choose positive belief. We can choose hope when we realize that it's just the flip side of a coin of fear.
Very powerful and very timely. Organizations often also hire based on credentials, industry experience. We talked about the uncertainty and changes in technology and everything that's going on. But that still happens even now.
What? Yeah.
So what leadership or human skills do you believe will become even more valuable as AI becomes more capable, or as the AI culture evolves, in the broader society, but in different companies as well?
I want to tie it back to one of the questions that we had in the chat. I think, especially in the time we're in right now, especially in the US, we're careful about talking about gender, but I do think it's important to talk about the fact that we're not all exactly the same and there are some patterns. So this idea of like, how do you, be humble, but sometimes, women don't advocate for themselves enough or know how to appropriately. So I just wanted to just respond to that, and then I'll kind of, tie it back to this thread. But the thought that was coming to me is there is research that women do face a double bind, right? So you advocate, you drive with strength. People have negative feelings about you. You are more supportive, more enabling, more kind of respectful to giving other people space, you're seen as not a leader. So that is a real thing that is driven and based in research. So I just wanted to name that is a real challenge that women do face. It relates to what I then think is a leadership strength, though. So, sometimes it's like, okay, well, how can you see where there is kind of power in a more inclusive, collaborative, connected way of leading? I actually think that is the strength that is going to help us, because when things get really hard, we know that the recipe for disaster is that we try to figure it out ourselves, which is the predominant way that we've been taught to be a leader. So if we know that the power is in the collective and we see patterns in society where divisiveness is being used as a strategy, then I think the most powerful thing we're going to have to leverage as leaders, regardless of, how you came into this world or how you were brought up, It's going to be about the leaders who are able to bring people together and to pull out the genius and power in the collective or within the diversity of the people you work with. And you don't have to tell anybody you're doing it, but to me, that will be the power play that will change your career trajectory and outcomes, even hard financial outcomes for organizations and for any other ways you want to organize.
Anything to add, George?
Now, the only thing I was going to say is, Emily's absolutely right, especially on the women's issue. And I'm married to way out of my league, truly won the lottery ticket. She's a C-suite executive. I just keep her away from the optometrist and I'm good. She's so incredibly brilliant, but I call her the Velvet Hammer. And one of the traits that, was really attractive to her when we started dating is this concept of empathy on a dimmer switch. I think is a great skill, and most people don't have it. And I'll go back. I hate using military examples, but there are times where I would do a mission and I had to have zero empathy because I was protecting Medicine Sans Frontiers, Doctors Without Borders in a very hostile area. I have to have zero empathy for what's coming at us. So I dial it to zero. That mission's over. I got to go back to taking care of people. I dial it all the way back up. I think leaders that know when they need to have high empathy and when they need to have low empathy and when they need to, how they need to turn that dial one way or the other is a critical skill going forward for leaders. And then the other thing, just want to say it on record, I hate the term female leader. It drives me absolutely crazy because we don't need the adjective. A leader is a leader is a leader. Unfortunately, there still are those people. But you said about, the companies over-indexing on industry experience, and that's what a lot of the next book is about. What I tell people is, listen, are you a student of the business that you're in? Do you know yourself? Are you improving yourself? Are you building trust? Are you building other leaders? And really, are you thinking and trying to see around corners? I mean, while I said move your horizon, there's a certain amount of anticipation in leaders where they're thinking, okay, I've got this plan. And most people get wrapped up in it like, oh, we're going to achieve these great results, and you become a cheerleader. But with any plan, whether it was back in my military days or today, I wanted to make sure that number one, okay, what is the greatest outcome positively? What's the negative outcome? And that's when I would look around the room and I'd say, okay, Cindy, what do you think about this? What am I missing? What do we need to adjust? What do we need to change? So the power is in the collective. Emily's absolutely right, but as leaders, sometimes you have to force it. And that's where I made sure I think it was a key to one of my, most of the success is that if you were quiet, you were getting picked on. I was going to ask for your thoughts always. And so I think that's a critical thing for leadership too, is making sure that if you tap into the collective, but there are a lot of people that are reticent to express their opinion or be different than the leader that they're answering to. And you've got to build that. I will not use the term safe space. I hate it. You have to ask for their opinion because that's a way of showing value, and then start to incorporate the best and live by the best idea wins.
I love
Thank
the
you.
empathy dialing up and dialing down because you're right, George. We fail on both ends of it, right? If we're too empathetic, then we don't make hard decisions. And those are often people-related decisions that are the hardest ones for us. And then the people who are too low on it, people don't feel safe to then state a challenge or a different point of view or bring data forward that leader needs to see. So I think that those are really important. That's a really important point that both are needed.
Yeah, and really that the best leaders that I've ever worked for, and it makes me sick because I try to be as good as they were. They are the innate ones that get it, is when do you dial it which direction? What is needed for the circumstance that you're facing? If it's a layoff in tech, you want to really crank up that empathy and that understanding that that person's valued, but this is a business decision. But if you're the one who has to make it, you have to kind of take empathy out of the equation because it's the survival of your business. So it's a tough skill, and it's one that leaders all the way through your retirement should always be practicing to improve upon.
Wonderful points. We're almost out of time. This has been such an amazing discussion, but I did promise the audience that I would leave some time for you to ask your questions. Would anyone like to come off mute and ask the question?
Jamie, this is
Okay.
Zara. Can you hear me?
Nice.
Emily, so great points on the stance on humility. Many of us who've been in the industry, 25, 26 years, when we look at our current leaders, I do want to isolate and highlight those women who reached high because, being a female, there's a role model there. So Indra Nui, Gini Rometty, I come from the technology world, financial services and technology. So these women I've looked up to, Sheryl Sandbergs of the world. These were outgoing, bold, courageous women. That was their differentiation. Modern day leaders are going to be different from each other as well. The acceptance of uniqueness of the talent, that's also very important in this grand scheme of things. Humility is a very generic term, but humility in certain cultures can be looked upon as your disadvantage.
I was thinking about like I don't know all of them, right? But just from what I could see from, I mean, Jenny, I do, but from the others, like just publicly what I can kind of thread through. And you're absolutely right. Like Zara, like there's always going to be your flavor, and that's you coach for what's the unique value that person brings and how do you make them be their best. But competence, like these people were extremely strong at what they did functionally. Like that's always what starts, because if you're driving revenue, if you're creating a new product, driving a new service line, like evidence, that's back to the impact, right? Like evidence of impact gets you pretty far. But then I do think you reach a point in your career where a lot of people start to cap out, which is going to be more about relationships and influencing skills and being able to read the room and knowing like which hat to put on versus to predominantly, just stay in your one preferred style or to just come from an area of subject matter expertise. I think that's where you start to see people drop out who maybe are as smart or as capable because they don't understand the dynamics in a room.
Or as George said about articulation, your resume is great, but you cannot basically present yourself and your strengths.
That's right.
Yes, thank you. I mean, that's a good
point. I did
point.
want to add one thing though, and I want to make sure that this is clear. Humility does not mean you're passive. It doesn't. And I want to be clear about that. It just simply means that I'm not always the smartest person in the room. I can always get better. That whatever I've done, I can take it a step forward. I can give you a great example. Everybody remembers Zero Dark 30 and the raid on bin Laden, the movie and everything, and they're done and they came back. You'd think that the members, and I know a couple of the guys on the raid, they're off having beers, high five, and, pounding their chest. Look what we just did. No, they were literally 6.5 hours in a debriefing. What did we miss? What did we do wrong? When they just pulled off one of the most successful missions in the world, 6.5 hours. And then I just wanted to share one example that I always loved, is because my wife is the Velvet Hammer, probably one of the most warm. She can read the room really well, probably one of the most humble leaders. She got me beat. But she was delivering a slide deck to all men, and she was a chief customer officer. And I'm telling you, I put him in the book, but I had to anonymize it because he was such a misogynist. I wanted to punch him. I didn't like the guy. Sorry, I'm a little too blunt, but she was going through her deck and he was doing the mansplaining thing. And she's very warm, very open. She stopped the slide. She walked over and she said, John, we can play team ball or we can play street ball, but we're not moving to the next slide until you choose which one you'd like to play. Woo! And she said it in the most charming voice. And I was like, oh my God, that just nailed it. So I don't want it to ever be passive. I recognize that it's a more difficult thing, on women's side, but it is discernment. All of those leaders, they had great discernment, and to Emily's point, they were all great at what they did and always got better and knew where to improve.
Very great question and really interesting discussion there. I'm looking at the time. We are a little bit over, but
Let's
We
get
have had,
Roberts.
yes,
Let's get
Robert has
Roberts
been
and
very
his
patient
hand
with
up.
his hand up. So if it's okay with you both, Emily and George, if we could just
Sure.
take
Yeah.
Robert's question. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So I've been in manufacturing for like 20 something years, 25 years. I've had the opportunity to be just below the executive level, so director roles and VP. Been looking for a job for about a year now, and I find that there are people in the predecessor roles are there less than a year or two, and they're looking for somebody to replace them. So I was wondering if what is that the hiring process from an HR perspective, or is leadership from a global perspective changing so drastically that they haven't figured out what success looks like at those roles?
There's probably a multitude of answers to your question. The first thing is you have to find out why they were in that. Were they replaced and did they leave the company? It's not a hiring issue, it's a selection issue, a selection and assessment. Their compass is off.
Okay.
So that tells you something about the company. If they're promoting the people or moving them somewhere else really quickly, that tells you an entirely different picture of the company that you're applying to. So it's really, why are those people turning over leaders? And I will share with you, I went into a job as the head of talent acquisition for a global cybersecurity company. They rotated through 5 leaders in 4 years for my job. And I still went after it because I knew exactly all the people that they were hiring were not me. They were crank turners. They did the function and you turned out the crank. And I'm like, no, I'm a change agent. I'm a rebuild agent. I actually think I'm the right person they should have hired the first time. Now, we just talked about humility and I got away from it. But I meant that as a confidence issue, that what they were hiring previously was not what I was presenting in the interview. So understand why those people are departing. And if they're departing because they're selecting wrong, are you one that's similar to who's been, in and out, or are you bringing something new to the table?
Yeah, well,
Be my short answer.
I'm glad you're saying that because I enjoyed it. I love the stories. Thank you so much for the insight.
Thanks,
Wish you the
Robert.
best. Thanks.
Good luck.
Okay, I just want to thank both Emily and George for your time today and encourage everyone to learn more about a Rose Group and the work that they're doing. And George has a new book coming out, The Defining Hire. I highly recommend everyone check that out. As we close, could you each share a takeaway that you would have everyone leave today with?
Follow your passion and don't lose positive belief. And whenever you feel stuck, just remember you're not by yourself.
Amazing.
See, for me, you're more than enough. 99.5% of the things I've worried about in my life have never come true. And I wasted so much energy on them. And I want to go back to Emily's thing, because it really was true in the military, and business is getting it more and more. And Emily's company emphasizing it is so important. The power's in the collective. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
You really are.
Yeah.
And I want to be where everybody else is good or better than me, and be able to tap into that. And you'll enrich yourself 10 times over than just being solo and try to go at it your own.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Sahana, thank you for bringing this together. This has been an amazing discussion, and I'm really fortunate to have been a part of it. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you. I'll be good.
Jamie.
Good to
Thanks
see you all
all.
again.